Hello everyone, my name is Marc Sabatella from Mastering MuseScore. Welcome to the MuseScore Café. So this is my weekly series where I talk about some aspect of using MuseScore, and today, being the first Wednesday of the month, it's the Ask Me Anything series. So one really nice thing now that I've got the whole community thing set up is I've got a place now where people can post scores if you want to get comments on something specifically. So I have seen a couple people have done that, and I'm gonna get to give some specific feedback on some things, and really looking forward to getting back into things. As you can maybe tell from my background, I'm back in my regular office here, and let's check. Okay, so I definitely see lots and lots of comments here, which is great, and I want to do a quick scan here, and I would love it. I will ask people to, how would I put it? Someone maybe help me out, and if there's questions that kind of scroll by and I don't see them, feel free to remind me of them, and kind of point them out again so I can find questions as they come. I see one of them, just a real simple question about chords, and let me just try to deal with some of those simple ones here quickly. So let's see. The A9 versus A add 9. So first of all, when we talk about chord symbols, it's important to realize that chord symbols are never meant to tell someone exactly what to play. They're meant to kind of describe something about the harmony so that a player can then adapt that information to what they're doing at the moment, whether it's strumming on the guitar, coming up with a chord voicing on the piano, or maybe playing an improvised solo over that chord progression. So a lot of the detail about what a chord symbol actually means, it's important to put it in that kind of context. So that said, A9 as a chord symbol, I will actually put this here. A9 would literally mean the following chord. I'll do it down here. A, C sharp, E, G, and B. It is an A major triad with an ninth added. It is an A7 chord with the ninth added. If I actually had A add 9, then this is actually a triad. So this is just the A, the C sharp, the E, and then a B. No seventh. So this is more a musical question, of course, than a MuseScore question, but that's fine. We know I'm happy to talk about that as well. But the difference is that the first number you see in a chord symbol basically means stack thirds that high. If this number was 13, you would stack thirds. So a root, a third, a fifth, a seventh, a ninth, 11th, and a 13th. So you stack the numbers as high as that first number. And then if you just see add, well, it just means take the triad and add the thing to it. So that's kind of my answer to that. So I see a question about time signatures, and you change the time signature and return the original time signature and can't remove the extra one. So I guess in order to know what's happening, this is a good example of why I would need to see the score you're talking about. Because normally you want to remove a time signature, select it and delete it. If there's some specific thing going on with your score preventing that from working, I would need your score. So if you can hop over to the community and go to, and let me show you where that is. So I pinned to the top the link to the community. And then if you come over to the conversation under MuseScore Café conversation, you'll see the post here, and you can maybe add in a comment there. Let me refresh this, make sure no one's added anything else lately, but it looks like not. So if you attach your score there, then I would be able to a comment here. I would be able to see what's going on with your particular score. But in general, you add a time signature, you just select it and delete it to delete it. So I would have to know a little more about what's going on. So Yeah, Kika asked a question about swing. And so that question, was that in here or is it somewhere else? I feel like it was somewhere else, but that's okay. If the question about swing, if you want to enter some eighth notes, okay, so swing, first of all, is a thing about eighth notes. Whoops, I didn't enter eighth notes, did I? Oh, let me show you something if you haven't seen this nice little magic trick before. I'm going to select those. I clicked here, shift click there. I'm going to cut, Control X, and now I'm going to use edit paste half duration, which is Control Shift Q for if you're into using the shortcuts. And now instead of quarter notes, I have my eighth notes. So if I play this, they're straight. However, if I come over to the text palette and I add swing text, now they're swinging. You know, as swinging as much as a computer swings. But you can also right-click that text, go to System Text Properties here, and under swing settings, you can set whether it's going to be the eighth notes that swing or the 16th notes that swing. And you can also select the ratio of the long, short, long, short, long, short, right? That's what swing is, kind of a long short ratio that happens in each pair of eighth notes. And you can set what that ratio is here. So I know there was a question Humble New Music asked about stuff in my piece that I've been showing lately, the piece I wrote for my father. So I'm going to make sure that I talk about those things. And figured bass, yeah, I'm glad someone can read figured bass. I'm going to come back to the questions. Actually, let me stick with the questions about chords. So if you want a seventh and an 11th, so A7 add 11 would be literally an A7th with an 11th and no ninth. But here is what I mean about you really have to think about what your goal is here. What is your point in trying to tell someone to play that rather than just A11? A11 would include a ninth, technically speaking, whereas A7 add 11 doesn't contain a ninth. But what real world musical situation comes up where that distinction is important? If you have a really specific voicing, so let me go back to the music here. There is a very big difference between that chord with its seventh G and this chord that lacks it, because this chord could conceivably be the one chord in the key of A. This chord is more a 5 chord in the key of D. That seventh is a significant note functionally. This chord here is more likely to take a G sharp. What did I do? I accidentally deleted that note. I didn't know you could do that. Check that out. If you click a note and click, it goes away. I had no idea. That is so weird. All right. So that chord with the G sharp is functionally the same as without the G sharp. In other words, this chord implies kind of a tonic function. So whether you have a G sharp or a G is a significant difference. It changes whether it's tonic or dominant function. It changes where that chord wants to go. It changes the type of melodies you would improvise over it. The difference, though, if I want to add an 11th to this chord, F sharp, D is my 11th. That B doesn't change anything about the function of that chord. This chord or this chord without the B have exactly the same function. Nothing about that ninth changes the function of the chord. So there's really no reason someone reading the chord symbol should have to worry about whether you thought they should play a ninth, because you don't know if they're playing guitar, piano, vibraphone, or if they're improvising a melody when you write that chord symbol. If you think you do know exactly what they're doing and you want them to play exact notes, well, then don't give them a chord symbol. Write out the notes. So that's one of my standard pieces of advice. If you are really picky about the exact voicing you want, don't try to trick them into playing that voicing by cleverly writing your chord symbol. Write out the voicing. And then if you literally don't want the B, then, write out a voicing that doesn't include the B. So that's my question about that. There's another notation for swing. Okay, so the notation that Dave is talking about here for swing is this one that you saw that I added well, in a cafe some time ago, I showed how to actually create this as text. This is a notation that people who don't actually play swing music use to trick people into playing swing. In other words, people who are accustomed to playing swing do not want to see this. This is a lie. Swing isn't triplets. It's a lie. It's more like 60%, 55%, something like this. It's something you have to feel. So people who are experienced jazz musicians would be insulted by this. That's like treating them like children, saying, "Oh, play this, and it will kind of sort of sound like swing." But if you are writing for children or writing for people who have no idea what swing is, this graphic, this thing here will kind of give them the basic idea of what swing is without having them have to actually know what swing is. Then they can just read this and come kind of sort of close to being swing. So this is just text here. And let me think. I can't remember, to be honest, if I actually set the swing properties on this. Yeah, looks like I did. I was very clever when I set this up and went to the text properties and set it to 66. So I actually showed how to create this using the special characters palette. If you go to the MuseScore website and do a search on the how-to articles, you'll also see someone's posted a graphic of this where you can just paste the graphic in. But I kind of like doing it as text because then I can attach those properties to it. And also, it's just kind of clever to be able to do it as text. I don't know. I like it. There's that. Can something be put under the staff? Okay, so what exactly are you asking about there when you talk about putting under the staff? But in any case, yeah, the way, if you were writing for people who know what swing is, first of all, you wouldn't normally need to write swing if the context makes it obvious that it's swing. If you're writing a piece that's very clearly a jazz piece with a lot of eighth notes, they're going to swing it whether you tell it or not. Like if I pull out my jazz fake book here, the real book, and pull out any given piece here. Oh, well, I guess they do kind of say medium swing up in the corner for this one, but that's not always the case. They don't always say swing. They might say, like this one says, fast bop. And bop is short for bebop, which is a form of swing music, and that's all stuff that jazz musicians would know. So yeah, but the word swing would be the more appropriate way to tell a jazz musician to do what they were probably going to do anyhow, which is swing. In fact, you'd more have to go out of your way to tell them to play straight. If you remove any ambiguity, if you're writing for jazz musicians and you want the eighth notes played straight, you actually would write the word straight eighths to make that really clear. Okay, so I did see a question about putting something underneath the staff, and I'm not sure what that was referring to. But I also see a question about what the numbers mean. 11. So you just need to count. So think about this. Here's an A. I'm going to write a scale. B, C sharp. I'm writing D, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D, E. And get rid of that. F sharp, G sharp, A. And I'm going to get rid of that line break here. So these notes you could number. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to end it as lyrics. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. So what we normally use are these ones here, the odd extensions, because chords are usually built as a stack of thirds like that. So the 9th is going to refer to B. The 11th is going to refer to D. The 13th is going to refer to F sharp. The only tricky thing about chord symbols here to know is that even though a major scale, the 7th should be G sharp. When we write A7, we don't mean G sharp, we mean G natural. It's just a fact of life that when we write 7 in a chord symbol, we don't mean the 7 that comes from the major scale. We mean a flatted seventh, because that's the most common kind of chord, and we didn't want to have to write A flat 7 or anything weird like that. So, but everything else comes from the major scale, even if it's a minor chord. Even if it's a minor chord and you write A minor 6, 6 is this note here, F sharp. So, and 13 is F sharp also. So that's something to know about chord symbols. All right. I'm catching up, right? So can something be put above a staff? I'm still not sure what the question is about above and below, but I will say that here's a lyric, X flips it above, right? Here's a chord symbol, X flips it below. So X in general flips things between above and below. So to make toolbars float, drag. I can take this and drag it away, and there it is. Now it's floating. You want it back? Just put it back. Right? Simple as that. So, and the same thing for like the palettes. I can make the palettes float, and I can also drag it right on back. I think for palettes, at least, you can also double click the title bar. I don't think there's anything like that for toolbars, but let's find out real quick. Can I double click that? No. Toolbars, you have to actually drag back to get into position. All right. I know that I still want to get to the question from Humble New Music, but I see all these ones coming in here, so I just want to not lose myself here. How to pin a toolbar to the workspace. Okay, yeah, so I guess that's the question about floating. So there you go. So there you go. Oh, the little caret symbol. Yes, you're right. This little symbol here floats it, and then I think that same symbol again puts it right back. So there you go. There's that too. So there's that. All right. So I might be caught up on questions from the chat. So what I am going to do is talk about the questions that Humble in Music was asking. And that first question was about the thing that I mentioned in my mailing list. And I do want to show that to make it really clear. So in my composition, I have all these places where I have a low note. Right? The low note is played as a half note, and it's played as 16th notes. Now, realistically, does that mean my pinky detaches from my hand and stays down there? No, it just means that the pedal does that. Did I have to notate it that way? No, I absolutely did not. And was it wise to? That I don't even know if it was wise, to be honest. But in any case, it is a thing. It's a thing you definitely see in piano music. You certainly see it in guitar music, where you indicate a note you want to sustain as a half note or whole note or whatever it is while showing the arpeggio. And the thing is, by default, if you do that in MuseScore, if the notes, if I try to enter, say, a quarter note here, and actually let me do that in voice 2. So I'm going to use voice 2, enter a quarter note down here, and then I'm going to switch back to voice 1 and enter my arpeggio. So that works nicely, right? The C's kind of melded together. However, if my bass note had been a half note, and then I tried entering 16th notes, E, G, C. There we go. Normally, when you're working in multiple voices, it's okay for the note heads to kind of merge together if they're both the same type of note head. They're both the filled in solid note head, because then there's no ambiguity. What I wrote here is a little bit weird, right? Because if you're only reading the up stem notes, you'd say, wait a minute, how can there be a half note connected to the 16th notes? That's weird. It is weird. And if it was a different person, if you're writing this like for voices, and it's like literally an alto voice singing the bottom and a soprano voice singing the top part, you would not do this. It would be very important to show that that the soprano has a 16th note there, the alto has a half note. There's two different things happening. But when you're writing for a single pianist or a single guitar player, it's sort of understood. It's like one of these things where you tell a little bit of a lie. So the way I did this is take this note and make it invisible. And by making it invisible, now, of course, right now you can kind of still see it because it's grayed out. But if I go to View, turn off, Show Invisible, now you can see this look. And yeah, it's a little bit of a lie. It's a little bit of a weird thing in that that first note, you kind of have to know it's a 16th note, even though it's not obvious, but we know. Okay, it's okay to do that. It's okay not to do that also. This is completely legitimate. It is completely legitimate to show it with the note head separately also. But then the question was about measure 4. Measure 4 here requires 3 voices. So let's unpack this. There's voice 1. I actually need to start with the previous beat because it's tied over. So voice 1 is the B flat and the C as a dotted half note, and then it becomes D and A, right? Those are the notes in voice 1 on beat 4. So 3 beats there, and then 1 beat here. Voice 2 is the F, and then it kind of expands into this little cluster of E and F sharp, and then it condenses down to G, and then G flat. That's voice 2. It's all quarter notes. However, I also wanted another note that comes in on beat 3 to sustain throughout the measure. If I had written this just as a quarter note, and I might have done that, I totally could have done that because the pedal, if you have the pedal going through, that note is going to sustain. You have to realize, and the same was true over here, whether or not I had really notated that half note or not, the pedal was going to sustain through that arpeggio because anyone playing this would know to pedal through that arpeggio. But in any case, I wanted to notate it because I like to do that. So in order to say I want that E flat literally sustaining through the rest of the measure, I needed to notate it as a half note. And yet voice 1 is already accounted for. Voice 2 has a quarter note because it's going to move from G to G flat. So I needed voice 3 for that. So to enter that, I have voice 1. Let me actually get the key signature happening here. I'll go through this exactly step by step. So voice 1 is 6 dot, so dotted half note, B flat, and C together. And then it was quarter note, A, and D together. Right? So that was voice 1. Voice 2 was that quarter note sequence. F, F sharp, G, G flat, where the F sharp had an E underneath it. So it's basically, let's go back, voice 2, F, and then it was that combination of E natural and F sharp, and then G flat. And then voice 3 was nothing for 2 beats, so I'll enter a rest and then make it invisible because I don't want to see it. And then I can enter my half note E flat down here. So that's how I entered that thing. Each voice in turn, left to right, with an invisible rest in front of that E flat. That's the passage right there. This F was actually tied over from the previous one. So that's what was going on there. And there's only a few places where I needed to resort to 3 voices. I say resort to. It's not a huge problem, but a whole lot of music can be done. What did I just do? Close my score? No, there it is. Mostly, you can do almost everything. There's only 2 voices happening through this measure. Pretty much most of what I do is only 2 voices. In fact, I could find the next third voice. Let's check this out. I'm gonna hit I click this note, and now I'm going to hit the right arrow to find the next note in voice 3. And it's the same thing. It's here in measure 9. By the way, you can't see what happened here. I could just see that the score jumped here, but then I can come down to the status bar and see that I've now moved to this half rest in measure 12 here. And then it's the E flat again. Is there another voice 3? Let's find out. It's half rest in measure 16. So here I needed 3 voices apparently also. That's right, because I've got a B flat being sustained, and meanwhile I have descending eighth notes, and I also have quarter notes. So there's only a handful of measures where I needed 3 voices, but that's pretty common in piano music, especially this kind of romantic type of piano music. Romantic in the sense of romantic era, not lovey-dovey romantic. Um, in Baroque music, yeah, if you have a 5-voice fugue, you could need 3 voices on a single staff. Typically, though, you would distribute the music in such a way that you don't need more than 2 voices per staff. But every once in a while, yeah, you have 3 for whatever reason. Maybe a 4-voice fugue for some reason makes more sense to have 3 voices on one staff and one on the other. In those situations, I might recommend cross staff notation instead, right? Doing what I did here, right? Of moving these notes. These notes belong to the bottom staff, but they're displayed on the top staff to indicate they're done with the right hand. And that's Control, Shift, Up, Down is what moves a note from the bottom staff to the top staff like that. Okay, so yeah, so my point is that 3 voices for piano music happens. Not a ton, but it definitely happens. 4 voices almost never when you need 4 voices. And I would say the same for guitar music also. 2 voices most of the time is going to be extremely common to need 2. 3 every once in a while. The 4th voice very, very, very rarely. All right, so more questions about the dragging of things, and I think they look like, yeah, so these I would actually call panels is a good word for it, the palettes and the inspector. Window is actually the more technical word for what those are, but of course window is the whole thing here, so that would be confusing. But technically speaking, as far as the operating system is concerned, this is a window. This is the palette's window, but calling it a panel I think makes a whole lot of sense. So there's that. All right, I'm caught up. Haha. Except for now, there's a nice question here about chords again, also, and then one about tempo that I'm going to try to address. So, Peter, you're here, right? Yes. All right. Peter had a question here with an attached score, and I do have the score loaded. So, for 6/9 chords. Okay. So first of all, your score here, you have a 6/9 chord. It is displayed, hello, stacked like that, right? Because in the jazz style, we do that by default. In the standard style, if I write C6/9 here, it also stacks them for that chord only. 6/9 chords are special cased to do that because it's the one kind of chord where you actually normally write it that way. There's a lot of chords where you might stack the extensions, but they're sort of arbitrary combinations and they could appear in any order. And sometimes people put commas between them. There's all sorts of different ways that people write other extensions. But chords that are major triads plus a 6th and plus a 9th with no 7th. It's a common chord and it's virtually always written like this, stacked. And so we special case that one in both the standard and the jazz styles. Other combinations of alterations, though, you see, are not stacked. Well, in point of fact, that's something that just is being worked on over these last few weeks. The Google Summer of Code, I did a session about that a month or so ago, and one of the students, the student that I'm mentoring, is working on chord symbol improvements, and just yesterday, in fact, he got stacking of chord symbols to kind of work. Let me see if I can show you a picture. It's still a work in progress. It's not totally there. I got to comment to him that the sizing is a little off from how I might want it. But check this out. If I go to the Google Summer of Code channel, somewhere in here. I thought it was just yesterday. Well, I guess it wasn't here. It's somewhere else on a private channel, so I'm not going to share it. But anyhow, he posted a screenshot where he has a setting that you can just choose whether or not you want these stacked or not. So that'll be coming in MuseScore 4 with any luck, assuming everything all comes together. So now let me read Peter's question in more. So if you want them horizontal? Well, yes. If you want, so first of all, I wouldn't recommend it. This is the standard way of doing it. But and I think if you write it as 6, 9, because if you don't, think about it, it's going to look like E flat 69, which that doesn't mean any, well, it means, something to some people maybe, but it certainly doesn't mean what you want it to mean there. It doesn't mean a sixth and a ninth. So the comma is what would allow that to happen, to make it more clear that there's a sixth and a ninth. So that would be a way of doing it. You could also optionally put that in parentheses. Some people put a slash instead of the comma also, and so we handle all of those things and arrange them horizontally if you prefer. I don't recommend it. This is the one chord of all the chords that could possibly have things stacked. That's the one chord that pretty much almost universally does stack them. All right, so the next question here was about measure 3, and let me hop over to the chat also and see where you have to see if Peter, if you've got any additional comments in there. No. Okay. So the question is about measure 3 to switch the placement of the bass clef, half note, and dotted 16th. All right. So let me undo all the changes I just did here and see what you're talking about. Measure 3. Oh, you must be talking about this measure. All right. So what is it you're asking? Let me see if I can make sense out of this. Switch the placement of the half note and dotted 16th. Bass note, dotted. Oh, you're talking about right here. All right. So if by placement you mean that you want this dotted 16th to be to the right of that, that's not, I guess I'm not understanding. I'm not understanding the question. So maybe like this. Oh, you mean these. Well, you entered them backwards, right? You should have entered this one first, followed by that one. There is kind of sort of, so first of all, that's the problem. You entered them backwards. You should have entered the dotted 16th first to go with the 32nd. However, there is a command that can sometimes correct some errors like that. If you go to Tools, Regroup Rhythms, it'll correct something. To be honest, I don't know that it deals with dotted 16ths and 32nds, but let's find out. Oops, did I hit the wrong one? Oh, look, it did it. It did it right. Yay. Glad to see it. Well, it sort of did it right. It changed. Wait a minute. Yeah, because this is not written well either. That's true. This is not dotted quarter tied to a 32nd is kind of weird. To be honest, though, what it changed it to is, the problem is this is just a weird rhythm, right? This note coming in on what's basically, oh gosh, I got to do math on this. This is the 5th, the 6th, the 6th 32nd of beat 2. That's a mouthful to even think about. So first of all, I'd have to think about how important was it to really write that, and rather than just write it as an eighth note and say it swung or something like that. To me, because I wouldn't want to have to read that no matter what, no matter how you do it. I feel like that's probably over specifying something, that if you write it more generically, then when I play it, I will take my time with that little arpeggio there and, do a little rubato on it and probably make it more or less like you wanted it anyhow without having written it that way. But I guess the deal is here, you've got a beat here. And so this is ugly. It requires 2 ties, but it does clarify what's going on rhythmically. It will be easier to read. Here's beat 1, there's beat 2, here's beat 3, and there's that note coming in. Okay, so I was counting it wrong before because it was so that hard to read. Now I can, oh no, this isn't beat 3. Sorry, this is the and of 2. And so it's the second 32nd of the and of 2. Or as I said, the sixth 32nd of beat 2. And yeah, that would be the more correct way of doing it. So that was how I got MuseScore to do it for me. If the question was just to how to reverse these two after you've already entered them incorrectly, what I would do is I would use cut and paste. I would say, let's cut this. Now come here and paste. And then take what's left and then turn it into a half note by pressing 6. And then I can retie it. So it would be kind of like there's no way to just take two notes and reverse them like that because that's not normally something that would come up normally. But if it's about correcting an error, MuseScore will do it for you. Or if you want to move things around, cut and paste is always the way to move things around, whether they're adjacent like that, or if I want to take this chord and just move it over here, right? Cut and paste does it. By the way, not just cut and paste, but let me show you this. If I cut this and then come over here, and instead of cutting it, I'm going to select it and I'm going to use swap with clipboard, Control Shift X. And that's going to paste it, but it's going to take what was there and put it back in the clipboard so I can come here and paste it there. So that actually swapped it. So in principle, I could have done that here as well. Select that, cut, and then select this, swap with clipboard. Yeah, I'd have to think through that more. It's swapping with clipboard on rhythms that don't match. I'm not sure even how that would work. But if you feel like playing with that command, have a ball. So Peter, hopefully that helps. All right, so classical T42, running 16ths that go back and forth between the left and the right. As you see, my example, Peter, has not started for today. Yeah, it has. Are you not here? Am I not live? Can you not all see and hear me? Boy, that would really suck if I've been talking this long and people can't hear me. So please, someone tell me that that's not true. Please, someone tell me that. Tell me that you can see me and hear me. Yeah, I'm live. And there's sound. Yeah, okay, so I'm definitely seeing questions.
Please.
Yeah, okay, good. All right.
Someone tell me that that's not true.
All right, good. Okay, so good. So, Peter, wait a minute. What did I lost my train of thought here. This was, about the running 16ths that go back and forth. So, as you can see, I'm doing that here in my piece for my father, right? So, and it is just that question of Control Shift up and down to move back and forth. Now, will you need to hide some rests? Well, maybe. It totally depends on the music. So sometimes you want the rest there. Sometimes you will totally want the rests there to make it clear musically. Like if you're writing a fugue and there's voice 1 has quarter note C and then a rest and then half note C, and then you've got some running rests, some running 16th notes here. And I now decide I want to move these notes up to the top staff. You want that rest, right? This rest needs to be there. I'm going to have to adjust its position because the collision avoidance doesn't work between voices, right? That rest needs to be there to show that voice 1 is resting there. But in some cases, it's not, right? If there is nothing else going on in that top staff, then you might want to not show that rest. So yeah, you would make it invisible. And notice that, again, I've turned off invisible show invisible here, but let me turn it back on so that you can see that actually when I click this, it's just there but invisible. So it's up to you. MuseScore's not going to know when you want them invisible. In fact, if I come to my score here, you'll see I did that. Let me show invisible here. You can see that here there is an invisible rest here. And that's because this chord here, I've got a whole note sustaining through the measure, and then I have a quarter note, and the same three fingers that are playing that quarter note are now going to play that 16th. So even though these 3/16ths belong to the bottom staff, really, I don't want to show the rest here because that's implying my fingers are coming off that chord, which they're not. They're coming off just long enough to play the chord again. So I could have showed a 16th rest or made this a quarter note tied to a 16th note or something like that. I just didn't. And we tell those sorts of little white lies a lot in piano music. So in any case, you need to decide for yourself which notes need to be invisible. One little change I made just yesterday on this piece, by the way, is this little passage here. I had originally notated it with these guys on the bottom staff. And that was because this D here is part of the melody, and I didn't have it notated that way. In other words, I had no rest there. I had that rest invisible. So I had this. Let me turn off my invisible notes again. I have a shortcut for it because I do that a lot. Oh, I need to make this one invisible too. All right. So the idea that this is a double dotted quarter and this is the 16th that goes with it. It's not really going with it, right? Because this D belongs to the bottom staff. And this is how I had it. But then I was thinking about it and said, well, wait a minute. My left hand is really playing. I mean, my right hand really plays these two notes. So I moved them up here yesterday when I was working on this piece a little bit. And then I started realizing, you know what, that's that I don't like that then, because now it's not clear that this D is what is completing the double dot. By leaving these in the bottom staff, it was a little more clear that the D is actually conceptually ba da 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 da, right? That D is part of the melody, and that fact was obscured when I moved these two notes to the right, to the top staff. But I want them in the top staff to give people the clue that yes, you're going to play these with the right hand. So what I eventually did was realize, oh, I need to add that D. So I turned on my invisible rests again, and I actually added the D and manually flipped its stem up, so that this is now how this is notated. And then I just updated it on MuseScore.com. So yeah, there's a lot of tricks like this that you might need to play with when doing cross-staff notation. And it helps to look at, like, how other editions, you'll see this sort of notation all over all over classical music in general, from Baroque to classical to Romantic. You'll just see that type of notation. So look for examples, look to see how other editors. Don't think the composer wrote it that way. No, that was the editor, the person who engraved that particular score. Chances are the composer wrote it, differently, and the editor's one who makes those sort of final decisions there usually. All right, so again, I'm mostly catching up. There is a question about deleting rests. And yes, you can delete rests. I would say I don't like deleting rests, and I'll show you why. You can do it. You can't delete them in voice one. That is true, because they are musically. We need something to have the uninterrupted flow of time through the measure, and voice one is that. But let me show you what happens if you delete rests in voice 2 or voice 3. So for instance, here is a place where I have that invisible rest in voice 3, right? And if I turn off invisible rest, again, I have a shortcut. By the way, if you've never defined shortcuts, it's Edit, Preferences, Shortcuts. And here's a whole list of commands. A lot of them have shortcuts already, but you see a number of them don't. And you just click one that you might want to define a shortcut for, and hit define, and then click your shortcut and hit add, and now you've got a shortcut. So for me, the show invisible command is one I use enough, because especially when I'm putting together educational worksheets, I use a lot of invisible stuff, as tricks to get what I want to happen. And so I have all of these commands tied to shortcuts: Control Alt Shift I for invisible, Control Alt Shift U for unprintable, which is what hides things like this. There, goes away, comes back. So anyhow, I use those enough to want shortcuts for them. Anyhow, so if I turn off invisible, that rest is gone, right? That's great. But if I now change my mind and say, you know what, I don't want a rest there, I want a C there. Well, all I got to do is click it and type C, and now it's a C. Well, a C in that octave, maybe. So it's really easy. Or maybe instead of that, maybe I wanted eighth notes. So I could, go back and change that to eighth notes. Whoops, 4, eighth note. And maybe I want the stem to be down, right? So whatever. I can work with that half note. But let's see, I'm going to undo all that, and this time I'm going to delete that rest. So I click this rest, I delete it. Now I want to go back and put a note there on beat 1. Good luck. If you go here and switch to voice 3 and you try to enter a note, oh, it does work at the beginning of a measure. Sorry. My point is a little bit gone, but let's try deleting this. Let's make this a quarter and a quarter, and I'm going to delete this rest. Delete, turn it into a rest, delete it. Now, if I try to enter in voice 3 a half note, it skips right over beat 3. See, I've got a half note here, and then I want to enter something on beat 3, but I can't because I deleted that rest. It left a hole. So that's kind of a drag. And yes, that's a limitation of MuseScore. It's not an unsolvable limitation, by the way. You can get that hole back. You're going to go to Tools, Voices, and exchange voice 3 with anything else. No, with voice 1. It's got to be with voice 1. When you exchange it with voice 1, the rest comes back because voice 1 has to be complete. So it adds the rest back for you. And then you go back and you exchange it back again. And now I've got my voice 3 rest. So if you find yourself with one of those uneditable holes, just exchange it with voice 1 twice and you'll get that rest back, and now you can edit it. For me though, I'd rather just hide the rest than because that's fine. I hide other things. I don't feel the need to make it gone. Are there preset metronome for the thing is, there is no clear. Well, let me restate the question. There's tempo markings like andante, say, or allegro. The thing is that allegro could mean a different thing. Like if I write a piece like this, and then I write another one like this, and this piece I want to be allegro, it's going to have to be a much faster tempo. So if I come here and I enter allegro from the palette, if you look at what's over here in the inspector, you'll see it's set to 144. Well, 144 is not very fast for a piece based on half notes, right? It's just not. But for this piece, it's extremely fast. For a piece based on quarter notes or eighth notes, it's maybe more like this feels like faster than allegro to me. That's presto, right? This doesn't feel like we're at allegro yet. So depending on the actual pacing of your piece in terms of whether it's notated using sixteenths or halves or quarters as the predominant rhythm, you're going to need a different metronome marking to establish that. So yes, there is a preset marking in here of 144. And yes, if you buy an old-fashioned metronome, it's going to say allegro is somewhere in that 144 to whatever range, but you have to take those numbers with a grain of salt because it really depends on things like this. So notice the follow text box is unchecked because that box only makes sense if you put actual tempo marking in here. So you can do that. I can put in parentheses, and then I'm going to use F2 to bring up the special characters, and then quarter note, and then equals 180, because now that feels, and then I'll come over here and say follow text. Now it's going to play at 180. Which maybe still isn't very allegro for half notes, but hopefully the whole piece isn't nothing but half notes. If it is, you should maybe reconsider whether you really should have notated it with half notes. But probably there's quarter notes in the accompaniment. And now it's going to feel allegro. Yeah, that feels allegro, but it took about 180 to feel that way. So anyhow, those are the things you can play with there. Yeah, and oh, Bob, I guess you're talking about those holes. There is another trick for fixing the hole. Fixing a hole where the rain gets in. Right, it's a Beatles song. Where's my hole? Did I get rid of my hole? I guess I got rid of my hole. Or did I just move it somewhere else? Oh well. If I have a hole, if I am in voice 2 and I enter a note and then a rest and then a note and then a rest and then I delete that, I now have a hole. However, what I can do is if I just enter a new quarter note here, it just skips over the hole, right? But if I enter it as a half note, then I go back and shorten it, like by pressing Q. I get the rest back. So there's a number of tricks for recovering those holes, but I just do not create them to begin with. Me. But it really doesn't matter. Whether you delete the rest or make it invisible, the effect is exactly the same in the final product. The playback will be the same. The printout will be the same. The PDF will be the same. It just looks different on screen. All right, so special characters was F2. So while you're editing text, and this goes for any text, like I could double click my title. Let me zoom in. Double click my title, and while I'm editing it, I press F2, and that brings up the special characters palette. Or this little icon down here, the lower left, insert special characters. And that brings up this special characters dialog that has a number of like accented characters, a bunch of musical symbols like notes and repeat measures and accidentals and things. But then also, that's just the common symbols. If you go to musical symbols, you'll see a ridiculous number of things, of symbols, that is every symbol from the SMUFL standard, the standard music font layout standard. And it's got all sorts of symbols that you've probably never seen before but exist somewhere in some published music. So they're part of the standard and therefore are part of the font that MuseScore comes with. So you can, and that's how I created that swing marking. Remember I showed you that swing marking? This swing marking that I had added to my palette here is just text. This is a whole bunch of special characters. That character there was off of the, not the note heads, I can't remember what it's called, individual notes. So if I add that, nope, that's a quarter note, so that's not it. It must have been beamed groups of notes. There we go. It's this one here. Aha. So that's how I built it, by actually building this symbol up from all the symbols here under musical symbols. And that way it's a piece of text. And in principle, a screen reader would actually read that. So a blind person would be able to read this better than a picture. To be honest, I don't know what a screen reader would read for that, but I kind of want to find out because it's fun for me. So I'm gonna turn on my screen reader.
Screen reader on.
It's going to take a minute because the screen reader has to initialize for MuseScore.
Orca for MuseScore 3.
All right, here we go. I'm going to click this thing and see what it reads.
MuseScore. Normal mode. System text equals. System text equals beat 1.
Okay, it only read the equals. It's very glitchy because when I'm doing these broadcasts, my CPU is taxed big time. But yeah, I guess it can't. I guess
Space. Equals. Space. Space.
Yeah, it's reading the spaces and the equals, but it doesn't know how to read those note signs. So at least this screen reader doesn't know. But it's
Normal
conceivable.
Mode. System text equals.
Conceivable that some other screen reader would. All right, so turn on my demo again. All right, so hopefully I'm pretty caught up here. I had some flags hit the stem. So Sora, I'm not sure I know what you mean. So here again is a situation where well, first of all, if you go to the support forum and attach your score, that's always a good place to get that kind of help. That requires a score. But for the purpose of this cafe, if you had gone to the community where I showed in the community and like Peter did here, actually attaching his score there, then I can download it and see the score that you mean. So unfortunately, without seeing the score that you mean, it's really difficult for me to know, what, like, are you talking about an eighth note followed by a 16th note, or an eighth note in one voice and a 16th in another voice on the same note? Are they the same pitch? So unfortunately, I can't really tell what you mean here. So I would need to see your score to know what you mean, and then we'd be able to answer real quickly. So your best bet at this point, because I'm gonna be wrapping up right here, just go to the support forum. The support forum on MuseScore.org. You will get usually an answer within an hour, often several answers within 5 minutes. I mean, it's amazingly how fast all the volunteers on the support forum are about responding to questions. If you go to the support forum, you post a question, you attach your score, you will almost always have an answer very quickly. But yeah, the next time I do one of these cafes, if you've attached your score somewhere that I can get at, I can take a look. But you'll have to wait a week. If you go to the support forum, you'll have your answer within 5 minutes, is my guess. All right, so I think I'm caught up on questions here, and what did I see about Federer? Oh, Federer about to be wiped out at Wimbledon. Okay, no, I hadn't been watching. I watched the French Open finals while I was back in Florida, but I haven't been watching Wimbledon since I got back. Okay, so I'm as caught up as I want to be. So let's wrap things up here. I want to thank everyone for being here for the MuseScore Café today. I always have a lot of fun doing these Ask Me Anythings. They're really fast because the questions come in, and I'm trying to keep pace with what people are asking about. But it's just a lot of fun, and I know that I'm giving you the information you want, so that's really great. But I do some version of this every Wednesday, so come on back, and next week I'll have picked a topic. Feel free to leave comments back in the community. Anywhere back in the community, you'll see a pinned post here in the conversation area. Let's hear your topic ideas, and I'm actively soliciting ideas for topics. And because usually on these cafes, I pick a topic to talk about and kind of talk about that topic and show things. So anyhow, there you have it. Hope you all got something out of this session, and I will see you all next time. And tomorrow, Music Master